Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Heroic Girls Book Club. As always, I am John Marcotte. I'm the founder of Heroic Girls, and with me is my co host Vivian.
Hello, I'm
Uh, Vi-
Vivian.
Vivian is an Imagineer, an illustrator, a animator. There are a few things that Vivian can't do, especially in the world of art, which is why she's here, because I just go, it looks pretty, and I don't have much to say past that. But I like to think we're yin and yang, that we each, yeah, something like that. So today we're talking about one of my favorite books of the past few years, and that is Velvet by Ed Brubacher and Steve Epting. It's a fantastic spy book. And I thought we should start out probably by kind of recapping what it's about in case you haven't read it, although you should have read it. Viv, do you want to take a crack at it, or do you want me to do the recap? I'm good either way.
Ooh, uh, I'll take a crack at a recap. My goodness. No, you do it. Just kidding. Change my mind.
All right. Well, here, I wrote something down so that first off, I think it's important to note that Velvet, in my mind, is obviously an homage or a pastiche of the James Bond era of like spy films and things like that. Velvet is basically, if you're familiar with the James Bond mythos at all, it's the idea that what if Miss Moneypenny, the M's secretary that stays home at home base and that occasionally James sleeps with because he's bored, what if she was actually the best spy in the world who was just happens to be in retirement after a mission gone bad? All the people that knew she was this fantastic spy have retired, and she was just using these super spies for sex on the side, not being she wasn't the one being used. It was kind of the other way around. So that's where we find her. The character is Velvet Templeton during World War II. This is a period set book. We should say that it's set in the throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And back in World War II, she was an Allied spy, and she continued in this super secret agency called the Allied Reconnaissance Commission. It's a spy agency so secret that other spy agencies don't know it exists. And she did that work for quite a while, and at some point she had a mission go wrong, and so she retired. And we pick up the book. She's working as the secretary of the director of the agency. No one else knows that she has this history of being this incredible spy. And one of her favorite James Bond types, one of the young men that comes underneath, gets killed, and she decides to investigate on her own. And she gets framed for his murder and goes on the run. And that's when everybody all of a sudden realizes that she's not just the girl who does filing, but she's one of the most dangerous women on the planet. And so she goes trying to track down why was the guy killed, why was he framed, what's going on, and she goes on this kind of globe-trotting adventure, definitely worthy of a James Bond or an Ethan Hawke type in Mission Impossible. And it's just really interesting seeing the flip of all the tropes and stuff, especially since it's period set of these James Bond films, flipped and told from the female point of view. So she's framed for treason, basically. She's framed for killing someone that she actually liked. She was investigating his murder. And at least this first chunk of the story, what we see is her going on the run and starting to uncover some pieces of the puzzle to figure out what happened. Did I leave out any important bits there? Did we get that a good recap? Oh. Wait a second, Viv. I think we got you muted. Or
I
you're very
muted
quiet.
myself when I took a sip of water. Pardon me. What I was going to say was I think that's a great overview. The only thing I would add is that I think there's also a lot of elements of her background as well that they sort of sneak in throughout,
Yeah.
and the way that that's done through these very slick reveals throughout really adds a lot of energy to the book, because you see her do something amazing and then you find out that she did something even more amazing in the past, and then you see her do the next amazing thing. So it's always providing context. So
Right.
it's almost like in a Jason Bourne situation where he doesn't know what he's capable of, then he's like, why can I do all these amazing things, right?
Right.
We get to see her do the amazing thing, and then you get to watch some man flip through her file and go through kind of the volumes 1 through 10 of her amazing adventures.
Yeah. She that's an important, I think, part of the craft that's being displayed here is it's a very
Mhm.
nonlinear story structure. This book requires you to pay attention because they're jumping back and forth through time. If we're lucky, they've labeled that up at the top, but there were a few times that they didn't, and so you had to be paying attention to figure out what time you were talking about. You go, oh, she doesn't have as much gray in her hair, or it's at a bob now, and so you have to go, this is a different moment in time. This isn't a weakness, this is a strength. The way they structured the story was brilliant in, other than the fact that she's on the cover, you might have gone into this book not knowing what you did, that Velvet was a secret spy. We know, like the people around her, we're not sure what Velvet is capable of or why she might be capable of it. So we're finding out these things along with her fellow spies and things and other people that she is interacting with, just how dangerous she is and what kind of person she is. And I think it's another important thing to note that we have what I would call a unicorn, which is a middle-aged woman in her 40s set as the protagonist of an action franchise. Which, I mean, there's Charlize Theron, and then it gets slim pickings after that. There's just not much else going on after that. Velvet is although we do get these flashbacks of her previous life, the main bulk of the action in the story, the narrative thrust, is happening today. We do get scenes set in the past, but we're really following her today and showing that she's still, capable, interesting, attractive, things that, Hollywood kind of forgets women when the second they hit 40 or as, who was it the other day? Carrie Ann Moss said that she turned 40 and on her 40th birthday, she was offered a role as a grandma. That was her birthday present. She says, "You're 40, grandma now." And so breaking out of that and, showing that, we do this with men all the time. I mean, crud, they're coming out with another Indiana Jones movie, which I just can't even. I mean, I love Indiana Jones, especially Raiders and
Temple of Doom.
No, not Temple of Doom. The next one, Last Crusade. I love those two. But he's like what 70 something, 80 years old now. That's going to be stretching credibility for me that he's globetrotting and swinging the whip and stuff. But I hope that it goes well. But my point is that they do stuff with people like him or Liam Neeson all the time. They aging men.
Sean Connery, Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, all those guys, as they age, still considered action stars. And then women, there's a huge gap between the young ingenues and then Judi Dench just sitting there over she Helen Mirren and are having a party over there at the other end saying, yeah, just get through these next 10, 15 years and then you can be with us over here. And the idea that women could have interesting lives and don't have to either fall into a matronly category or a sexy ingenue category is kind of lost on Hollywood. And this is how you do it. They've given a blueprint in this book, Velvet. So you want to, I always like talking about the art first because it's the area that I feel the weakest in. So do you want to take us through a little bit of Steve Epting and I think Emily, what's her name on colors? Because I think the colors are nice. I have it, Emily Breitweiser on colors.
I got the buh.
Yeah.
Do I get a point for the buh?
Yeah, sure.
Well, I think this was pretty probably one of the most straightforward, I would say, Western comic book styles that we've seen so far since I started this, engaging in this book club with you. One of the things I did really like was, Steve Epting has been around for a really long time. So I think it's easy to sort of track the changes in his style. So, he's got that really, I don't even know what era that is, the 90s style and what you kind of, where the line work was just kind of pretty straightforward and the same all the way throughout a book. One of the things I really liked in here was he gets pretty loose sometimes and things start to look very inky, a little Bob Peaky. You kind of get some of that 70s movie poster vibe from some of these big color, especially back here. You can see see that red color wash in the center with the inky lines all around it. And I think that is so much more compelling than just a flat plane. Of course, technology makes things like this a lot easier, but than a flat plane with just a clean line on top of it. So having that sort of dynamic shades with different stuff, and then making sure that these action sequences she has are in a very striking with the red washes, and then the espionage happening in the blues.
Right.
sneaking around and that kind of thing. I was like, oh, that's really good. It's good color theory. Yeah, like putting these blues and oranges everywhere. I mean, this is very 2000s Jason Bourne. Like every spy movie was like blue and orange, blue and orange. Like
Yeah.
you had those colors together, right? I don't know about you, but in my mind, I was casting her as Michelle Moynihan. Were you doing any
Oh,
mental casting?
yep. And this goes to a point that I'd written down. Actually, you're killing me on the art because what I'd written down was the whole thing looks like posters for a 70s action flick. It was obviously period set. And they use this color scheme of blue and orange all the way through the book. It's almost
Mm-hmm.
duochromatic. I mean, they barely ever use another color. Yeah, I had some fan casting down. I was Moynihan's a good choice. I was thinking maybe Lena Headey or Rachel Weisz. I was looking
Mm,
for someone that was a little bit older that that would be one of those actresses that's falling into that uncanny valley where people forget about them for certain kinds of roles.
yeah.
And I thought those are two women that are in their 40s, very attractive, could dress down for a little bit and play mousy, and then I think they could surprise you. I think it would be really interesting for Rachel Weisz, who's not normally seen as an action star, but I
Mhm.
think she's got the chops to pull that off. So
I didn't think of Lena Headey. That's a really good one because she terrifies me.
yes,
Dread and Game of Thrones, obviously.
yeah,
But yeah, the whole 70s movie aesthetic, the Bond aesthetic. Like I was saying, Bob Peak. I don't know if you've seen posters for like West Side Story. I think
right,
he did one of the Bond posters as well, and then also just the Drew Struzan, who did the Star Wars posters, Indiana Jones posters. So having all those splash pages in between that give you in Velvet, her splash pages are, her sort of the sexiest moments that you're going to see in the chapter, like the gun, the people looking surprised, a car. Yeah, like you know, it's so indicative of that era and of the genre, right?
and what I appreciated is, I mean, let's be honest, except for Emily, who's the colorist, this is a book written and drawn by men. Uh, the entire book, and you're going to have a better perspective than I am. I felt like they were able to make her sexy without sexualizing her. She seems in control of what she wants to be, and it isn't a book where guys are going to be getting it to ogle at her. That isn't how the intent of how she's drawn or anything. The times that she is kind of in sexy garb or something like that, it's clear that she's doing it with intent and purpose to be in control of the situation. She's running the show the entire time, and I did appreciate that you could show her kind of. She doesn't have to be dowdy in order to exist in this world, but she also doesn't have to be just eye candy for the male readers. So, I mean, what was your
Yeah.
take on that?
I mean, I didn't do a read on that until the second time through because I was like, let's just take it in. And it's such an awesome story. And then when I
Yeah,
read it through the next time, I was kind of like okay, trying to be a little bit more aware of that aspect of it. And, knowing that is two white men's take on a feminist lead. I'm sure they're thinking like, Sigourney Weaver, Linda Hamilton,
yeah,
Bond, and Moneypenny. You're right. I think they did a really good job. There was a couple of times where I had some concerns, but then when I thought back on it again, I sort of backed off of wondering if that was something done on purpose. So at the very beginning, actually, producer Patty had pulled this up earlier. You start the whole story off with coming from the perspective of the Bond character, right? He's
right,
being badass. He's gunning people down. And while he's thinking about like the secretary that played him, and that, they were sharing crass stories is what they had
right,
said. Right. And then very abruptly, the story shifts and it
right,
shifts to Velvet. And the first shots of her are, she's undressed and sprawled in bed and,
right,
in a low cut negligee. And then she steps out of her negligee and goes directly into the shower. And then she goes to her job as a secretary. So I feel like they're really kind of here she is stepping out of her, her
right,
sexy pink gown. And, anyone can tell you don't wake up in the middle of the night with a blowout and then take a shower. So I'm like,
right.
come on, guys, like you should know better.
Well, maybe Ed Brubaker and Steve Epting couldn't tell you that. I will say this though: if you go back to the thing where she's getting in the shower, there were
Mhm.
so many more objectifying ways they could have framed a woman getting in the shower. We're seeing her head, her feet. They're hinting at it rather than showing it, and I did
Yeah, yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, I appreciate the fogged glass at the shower.
yeah,
you know?
so,
So there was a
yeah,
lot of
but
things like
fair
that
point.
where,
And
yeah,
I,
but to me that was it was throwing you off the scent, right? It's like,
right,
oh, here the secretary goes to work, right?
right,
And then when you first kind of start seeing her taking in information in a certain way and then acting on it by climbing over rooftops, and yeah, she's pulled her hair back. She's a
right,
woman at work, right?
right,
Um, I really felt differently about it after I thought about it again.
right.
Excuse me. And then the only other time where I was like, I don't think you would have drawn this in this way if this were a man, is when Velvet is going to Carnival. And so
Yeah,
she's going to wear a big ball gown.
right.
And did you clock this one?
The lingerie scene where she's got garters and
She's standing in front of a mirror, and the
right,
the POV is behind her,
right.
thereby allowing the front and the back to be viewed simultaneously while she
The ass shot. Yeah, I remember that one.
adjusts for garter. And it wasn't even a good ass shot either. It was like
No,
they
I had two
missed the
thoughts of it, and one of it was they
contours.
were trying to walk that line between not
Hmm.
sexualizing her, but also capturing that kind of glamour, everyone's a super attractive person feel of like a Bond movie or something like that. And it's a fine line to walk, and I think they were trying their best to be respectful. And did they waver one way or the other? I think their sins were not horrible or breaking it for that. Like you said, the first read through, I doubt if you notice those things, but I think there was an honest effort made to not go there, and every now and then they may have gone on a little bit too far one way or the other, but I don't think there was an intent to sexualize, and I appreciated that. So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, because that was the thing of her. Even that shot, I closed up in real close to take a good ogle at her beautiful form, and it really wasn't a super tight drawing. Like it was in the wide, so she was
right,
kind of small in the frame. The mirror was even further away.
right,
It was the suggestion of what she's wearing underneath
right,
her this, and then she puts on this enormous gown, which it's like no cleavage, no this, no that. I was
yeah,
kind of like, okay, so this is it was almost more of like setting the scene, right?
right,
And establishing her womanhood, because I think that's something that when you think, oftentimes when feminism is framed by male authors or male artists, the
right,
idea is, oh well, you remove all sexuality and somehow
right,
that's supposed to be a solution, like uh, removing the breasts from Lola Bunny for Space
yeah,
Jam, right? And so
yeah,
now that she has no breasts, now she's empowered and a better athlete all of a
right,
sudden, like as though you can't have those things and do your
right,
job at the same time. So I thought that was like a good positive expression of her femininity.
right, yeah, and I think that the times where you might have pause are debatable moments. You can have this conversation and go, was that too far? Was it not? I don't think any of them were just clearly where they were trying to do something wrong there. And we've probably spent more time on that aspect of it than it deserves, considering how few and minor the infractions might have been, and probably accidental. They in general, the book did, I think, a very good job of balancing that, of showing her as an empowered woman. That opening scene where the guys are talking shop and her name comes up is so indicative of her character in the rest of the book, and we don't get it. It's they're all sitting around, and what had happened was they were all talking shop, and one of them said, "Oh yeah, I had the secretary," and then it turns out all of them had, and which might just seem it might be framed in a way that she's just a slut or something like that, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not it. The fact is, it's the best spies in the world, and none of them knew that she was sleeping with all of them. And as you go through the book, it's clear that Velvet is a damaged person. She's
Mm-hmm.
in much the way that Bond is after his wife Tracy Bond died in On Her Majesty's Secret Service with George Lazenby. Nobody saw that one because it wasn't Connery, but it's good. There is a reason Bond is so cold towards women, and it's actually in textual in the book. And Velvet using men, very similar backstory to Bond. There is a horrible tragedy in her past
Mm-hmm.
involving a romantic relationship that has caused her to just feel like she should just use men and toss them away and not make any attachments, and that's what she's been doing. And so it isn't. Again, they don't spend a ton of time showing sexual encounters or anything in the book. That's not really what we're doing here. But just when you're painting this picture of there, it is just casual passing moment in the opening. It's how we're introduced to the character. Is all the guys, that are these big spies at the agency getting around and suddenly realize that she's kind of played all of them. None of them
With
had clues.
ease.
With ease, didn't not
With
a
ease.
single one of them had a clue that she had other relationships or that she was anything more than she appeared. Velvet had managed to basically fool the best secret agents in the world for an extended period of time, and in this minor way, it does kind of set the scene to let you start getting the hint that Velvet's something more than what they think she is. She's not just this Miss Moneypenny secretary that sits at home and pines for them. She's got a lot going on too.
Mm-hmm.
So
I love these panels.
yeah, it just when I looked at this, what I saw the entire book is this is a cinematically drawn book. This is a book that is begging to be turned into a movie. It is just like, oh God, make this into a movie. I mean, obviously they were taking inspiration from movies, from like Bond movies and spy movies of the 70s, 3 Days of the Condor type stuff. But just on top of it, the way that they told the story, you went, someone please, it's already storyboarded. Just pick this thing up and film it. This is an amazing spy story. It's a great story that isn't told very often with that female protagonist, older female protagonist. I'm like, oh God, please make this. Just make this movie. The book has a very cinematic feel. It's probably partially due to subject matter and partially due to how they're telling the story. It just feels like it should be a film, and I really hope that at some point that they pick them up on this.
Something that this reminds me of, I'd written a note here about the time jumps and how we'd mentioned that sometimes it was a little bit confusing if you had a flashback within a flashback or something, and everything having taken place between basically the 50s and 73. Was how good the styling was on Velvet and on the other people, because fashion changed so much in those times. So I just wanted to note this shot of her in Monaco, which is 51. I think that's what that says. And she's got that, that bob, right? And then when you see her on her honeymoon with Mockingbird Richard, which was 18 years before, so early 50s.
Right.
She has this beautiful wave, right? She's doing like the big wave. And so just by seeing it, you can tell that this was, the style of her bathing suit, the style of her hair. So it's such a great snapshot of, it makes her whole life seem so episodic.
Right.
Again, cinematic.
I am not enough of a fashion historian to speak to the accuracy of what they're doing here, but it was obvious that they drew with intent here. They were trying to set period and time and location with each drawing, and you definitely notice when she's in one era versus another, and they're consistent. They obviously there was a timeline somewhere written up there, and this is Velvet's life, and this is what her hair looked at these different landmarks, and this is kind of where her headspace was, and so they had a bunch of pictures cut from old Vogues and old movies and stuff tacked up right underneath there to say this is what Velvet should dress like and what she should look like in those eras. So I thought we mentioned her husband. She married one of the spies at some point in her early career. She settled down. She had an agent that she kept getting sent out on missions with. His name was codename Mockingbird, and he was Richard Donovan. I just had to look and make sure I got the last name right. And that's the tragedy that's in her past. She had this husband, and we see a flashback from her point of view at one point when they were on their fourth honeymoon, and you get the idea that their honeymoons were them being sent out on assignment to all these exotic locations all over the world. And so she was using that as an opportunity to, they would have a honeymoon, and they would also take down the Sultan that was selling nuclear secrets or whatever their top secret spy mission was. She gets a little suspicious of her husband acting oddly, and when he thinks she's gone to sleep, he sneaks out. So she gets dressed and follows him on the rooftops in a very almost Spider-Man, Daredevil-like fashion, leaping from rooftop to rooftop, tracking him down, and sees him make what looks like an illicit exchange with some bad guy. They give a name that we've never seen.
Professor von Strauss.
Professor von Strauss. That is just such an evil ex-Nazi name. We know he's bad. Yeah. So, and then when he comes back, he finds her up waiting for him, and she tells her that he just couldn't sleep and was taking a walk, and she gives him a look, and all of a sudden he tries to kill her, and then she reciprocates. They go back and forth, and she ends up killing her husband. And so that's the thing that's caused her to stop being a spy and transition to being a secretary. I mean, the emotional toll of finding out that your husband is a double agent and was, tried to murder you was too much. And then way towards the end of the book, if you're paying attention, and this is a twisty plot, she meets an ex-KGB agent called the Roman, who is another person when she's trying to piece together why she's being framed and what the agent who was murdered that she got framed for, what he was up to. He had met with him, and he talks to him, and he was asking about if one person, because he's ex-KGB, was Mockingbird a double agent. And he said, no, not at all. So she knows now that her husband, who she assumed was a double agent, was not. And what probably had happened was he came back and knew she had been spying on him and thought she was a double agent. And she had basically killed him maybe for nothing. Or did you get a different thing out of that?
Oh, so she checks with the agency. So she calls in and has some kind of, what I interpreted to be, she calls like Bartholomew's, or it sounds like a hospital, has some kind of a check-in. And she says something about how is the health of her husband. And they say that he had, here it is.
Yeah, there we go.
The telephone booth. Yes, thank you, producer Patty. So she has this telephone exchange, and in my mind, that is a setup from within her agency, that she had a almost like a directive or a confirmation that from the inside that he was a double agent. So in my mind, that's where I was thinking her certainty was coming from. That
well, I thought it was when he tried to kill her, but what I got out of this, because I read this scene too, was that this was one of the moments when I thought the time might have shifted on us a little bit, and it was a matter of days, so it gets confusing. I thought this was after she had thrown him out the window, and she was checking, and he actually was alive, but they didn't think he was going to make it, and so there's a hint out there that what if he's still alive? He could be the one pulling the strings. Someone in her past has been working on this a long time to frame her and stuff. It could be the husband. Huh? But there are lots of possible suspects, but that is what I got out of this. And again, I went back and reread this a couple of times because I was trying to make sense, and I was taking it literally, and maybe I should be on your path, but she was asking about the health of her husband because he might not recover. I thought, well, she threw him out of a window, so he's going to die. And but she didn't.
When he was on the ground with the puddle behind his head, like it looked like he'd kind of hit the curb and slid off or something. I was like,
well, he fell 2 or 3 stories and hit his head and was bleeding out. It didn't look like something you got up and walked away from. But this is like a James Bond type movie, or where the bad guy that you think you killed could come back. And so I'm wondering if that might be we don't find out in this book. You find that there are 2 more volumes, and then Velvet wraps up, which is another good reason to make a movie. It's a finished, complete arc. And so that was where my mind went. I thought this was a bit out of sequence, and that they were showing us what happened after the murder. They were showing, or after the confrontation. She was calling the hospital there, maybe even locally, and they were saying that, no, he's not going to make it. But she never got that confirmation, oh, yes, he's dead. She got the, he's not going to make it. And I'm wondering if she walked away, and it turned out he did make it, and after a long convalescence, he decided to get back at her. That's a possibility. There's also the second in command is this lieutenant director that's gunning for the director's job and is using this as leverage to try to get the current director of the agency out. There's all sorts of different people that could be behind this, but I thought this was a strong candidate there because they made such an issue of it, and it's so intimately tied to her past. So I think somehow this whole confrontation with her ex-husband is going to be relevant, whether it turns out he's pulling the strings or that incident is directly tied to what's happening now. Somehow this is going to be very key to what's going on. I don't think this is an accident, that this was a setup, or it's going to be a mission of vengeance from her ex-husband in a situation where they both had the wrong impression of one another. So
yeah, this was really strange to me that the first thing he went to do was throw a punch.
Yeah.
And not like put her in a chokehold. It's just such a weird. Anyway, it's such a brutal fight that they have. this actually happens like a handful of times in this first volume where she gets into hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah.
And that was something else that I really liked about the storytelling, is that fights aren't long, drawn out, choreographed kung fu sequences like we often see in films. And she addresses this in her when she's fighting. Fights should end in 5 seconds. And if they go any longer, you're in trouble.
They should go in 5 seconds, and if possible, she doesn't want the other person to know they're in a fight. Basically, she's saying, and this is probably true as a woman who is often not as strong as her opponent, is get the drop on them and take them out before they even know you're coming. Because if you have to go toe to toe with somebody, that's going to be a problem. So I thought that was smart and probably realistic to her situation.
Yeah, and then I also appreciated that this wasn't. I don't know if you've seen a movie like Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. A lot of times, fights between men and women are shot or choreographed to seem a little bit titillating.
Yeah,
and I really appreciated that this was just sort of like two professionals who were like, bow. They were gonna kill one before the other one was killed. I wanted to say something about something you were talking about earlier.
I'm going to bring up something while you're thinking.
Okay.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith is a complete non sequitur, but Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they're remaking it right now with Donald Glover and Phoebe Waller. What's her name from Fleabag? Yeah, Phoebe Waller-Bridge. They're redoing it. They're friends from being in the Emmys and being up against each other and stuff, and they've decided to make a movie together. He presented her with her BAFTA award for Fleabag. And he was hilarious. He was up there talking about how he was hoping to win for Atlanta, and then he wanted to hate her, and then he met her, and she's like, "Damn it, she's charming and everything too." And, so they've evidently decided to make a movie together. Mr. and Mrs. Smith was done like 4 times now, but I will certainly give it a shot with these two in the leads because I love them. So all right, let me go back.
For sure. That's good news. I needed some good news today. I think I wanted to say something about her husband. So I really appreciated that her backstory, her damaged backstory, as well as her childhood flashbacks, everything was tying together with the current 1973 plot line. Yes. And I feel like a lot of times people think like, what's the sad thing that can happen in my character's past? And oftentimes like, oh, my wife died or my girlfriend was kidnapped and I never saw her again. And it's kind of something that has nothing to do with the present, but it's made clear in the story that whatever she's dealing with right now is a continuation of her past trauma. So I really like that they pulled that all the way through.
Even to the fact of what a brilliant operative and agent she is. They talk about her. She was the first woman ever accepted as an agent into this Allied Reconnaissance Commission place. ARC. It's called ARC. We should just go with that.
Allied Reconnaissance Commission, formerly the Allied Espionage Group.
Right. That ARC. It's like Spectre. I don't know. I can't remember what Spectre stands for, but it's a cool acronym. So we'll go with ARC. And she has a trainer who is Miss Lady Pauline, and she overhears her at one point, or she theorizes, I should say, that she was training her because she knew that as a woman she would be under a ton of scrutiny, and so she couldn't just be good, she had to be the best. She had to be better than everybody else because she knew she would constantly be proving herself. This is an interesting book, and there are valid story reasons for it, but this is a book about a woman who is existing in a man's world. There are virtually no other female characters of any note or importance in the book at all. There's one that I can think of, and she doesn't care.
I counted 3 with names.
Yeah,
there's Daisy, who works in like the library. And then there's Meg, who's crying after Jeff dies.
Yeah.
And then there's I didn't even write her name down.
It's Maria, General Stepanov's wife.
Yeah, Maria Stepanov,
she's the only woman that has any weight in the story or importance, and has a little bit of agency. But then you think about the time they were existing in, and this is again, she's operating in a time and a place when women were kept away from the reins of power, were not put in positions of importance. So she finds herself basically operating, and it works to her advantage. She uses it because people just underestimate her constantly. They do not see her value, and she manages to surprise and get the drop on men often because they don't recognize that she might be a legitimate threat. It's funny. They when she's framed, an entire squadron of trained agents comes to get her, and they have her surrounded. And the mistake they make is they think it's just the secretary, so the guy walks right up to her and gets close. He had a gun. If he kept the gun on her the entire time, he would have been fine. But he got up close, and all of a sudden it was hand to hand, which she doesn't like, but he wasn't expecting. And she takes out like what 4 or 5 guys. She puts them in the hospital, one with possible brain damage. They're talking about it, and then the guy says, and afterwards, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, or anything, but I was looking at her when she went away, and she was enjoying herself. She was smiling. And I went, that's another kind of moment. She had this big kind of period of mourning where after her husband died, where she's working as a secretary, just trying to kill the pain, and then by being forced to be back into that spy lifestyle, this is where she feels alive, where she feels like she's making a difference, where she feels like she's making, has agency in her life and in the world, that she's a person of importance. She, that's something that she'd kind of forgotten about, and finds herself thrust back into that role all of a sudden, and she remembers how much she likes it. So that was kind of a nice thing too. So the flashbacks tie directly to the story. You're absolutely right. It's a very good economy of storytelling here. There's not a lot of wasted scenes or scenes that don't work for multiple purposes. Everything's building us to this conclusion. I just, I thought it did a spectacular job that way.
I was so speaking of the flashbacks too, I was happy that she didn't get her job through her dad. I feel like that's something that happens a lot in comics, in most movies, where the only reason a woman exists in that space is because, like, oh well, my father was in the military, my father blah blah blah, and they kind of just, that's sort of like a general place where they leave people. But her, I think they say her dad worked for Roosevelt. He was some kind of a ambassador, I think it was.
And I think he had met with Roosevelt, because she's British. She's working for.
She's American, I think.
Well, she said New York was her city, but I got the impression that the agency was London-based, and I thought she was British. I think
the agency was London-based. The guy, one of the people she talks to, can't place her accent, and I was wondering if it's because she was educated in like a boarding school.
It may be ambiguous at this point. I mean, it's an allied agency, so she could be from almost any allied nation,
true,
right?
Yeah.
So I will say this: I think we may have hit a point where it is not specified, and we've each made our own individual assumptions about that. They do mention, she says New York is her city at one point, and her dad doesn't work for Roosevelt. He worked with Roosevelt, and then there was an ambassador mentioned. So I'm like, well, he could be the ambassador for Britain. So it just, but anyways, during the war, she was sent away to boarding school, and that to me felt very British, although it could just be upper crust, I guess. And that's where she met Miss Pauline, and she aced all of her tests and was bored, and that's when she got recognized. She's just brilliant. She has a photographic memory, and this Lady Pauline recognized her potential and pulled her out of there and started training her in earnest as maybe a 16 or 15-year-old to be this uber spy, and that happened relatively quickly. She was out in the field during the war, probably before she could legally vote, and carrying out these missions. You see a few flashbacks of her all the way back in World War II, and then most of it's immediately post-war, which is actually the track that the original Bond books took. Bond was originally a commander in World War II that became a spy, and then a lot of his early enemies were tracking down ex-Nazis and things, that were left over from the war. So
I was reading about Ed Brubacher, which I didn't realize, because I think the only thing I had recently heard about him was, Civil War. I didn't realize he wrote Gotham PD.
He was Gotham Central.
Gotham Central, sorry,
He and Greg Rucka, who are my two of my favorite writers, wrote that together, and they would alternate storylines. Ed wrote the day shift. It was the detective, is the major crimes unit of Gotham, the one who was in charge of tracking down people like the Riddler or Mr. Freeze or something like that. This is a brilliant book, by the way. It's one of my all-time favorites. They were in talks at one point to turn it into a TV show, but it fell through because they were making Gotham, and they chose to go that route instead. They made a mistake. They should have done Gotham PD. But it's the cops in Gotham and how they view these crazy villains that are going around killing people, and especially how they view Batman. And so they broke it up into the two shifts. There's cops that cover the night shift and cops that are the day shift. And Brubaker ran the day shift crew, and then Rucka ran the evening shift crew, and they would alternate storylines. Two of the best crime writers you could possibly want. It's where Greg Rucka took the character of Renee Montoya and really made her something. She had been a very minor character in the cartoon. And but the thing that I think is interesting for relevance for today is that Brubaker and Epting created Winter Soldier, which is also a spy, a twisty spy thing. And that's why everybody needs to buy Velvet and make Velvet into a movie, because recently Brubaker has made a comment saying that, the Winter Soldier, a character he basically created, has a TV show now, was in the movies and everything like that. And he said he has made more movie from being a cameo that he did in the movie Winter Soldier, playing the scientist that shocks Bucky, than he made for all the work he did creating that character. He's not getting, writers in comic books do are work for hire. You create something and then Marvel owns it. And, he's seeing this incredible success of the character that he created and all these new properties that are being based on it and movies and TV shows. And then he's going, I didn't get anything for that. So that's why so many of the great creators are going over and doing things like Image and things. If Velvet ever strikes big, and it should at some point, I hope it does, is that the guy who actually created Velvet is going to get rewarded for that. And, I think that at some point, Marvel and DC and those guys will have to, I think there's a bit of a hemorrhaging of talent as more and more of the creators are seeing their works. It didn't used to be that anyone made a comic book movie, so the idea that there was this giant pot of gold over there didn't really enter into the equation. But as they see more and more of these properties picked up, made into movies, comic book creators are going, God, why am I doing all this work trying to make something for you that you'll take and make $1 billion on? I won't get anything. I said, if I'm going to put all this love and effort into something, I'm going to make it for myself. So Velvet is an extension of that. And it's definitely a book worth buying up. I recommend the big, this guy, get the omnibus here. Has all 3 volumes in one. And I got a bunch of gift cards for Christmas, and I went on a buying spree because Target had buy 2 get 1 free graphic novels, and they have a bunch of them online that you can't get otherwise. So I went and I have not even cracked the wrapper on that, because I do have the single volume 1, 2 on that. So it's on my list, but I'm going to read the entire Velvet. I'd read the first collection, and I thought it was brilliant, and I lost track at some point, and I always meant to buy this, and I did. So
I read ahead a little bit, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to. I knew it would confuse me if I went too far, so I was like, just keep it contained to volume 1. You actually lent me your copy of Gotham Central. So, and I'm a huge fan of like any kind of detective story, police procedurals. Are one of my favorite genres. So that was something that was super, made me super happy, because I was like, I really enjoyed this, and I was like, Gotham Central. Why? I didn't realize he had done that. So something else I didn't know about him was his dad and his uncle were both in the CIA, pretty high up, and so he's personally inspired to basically tell their stories.
Right.
So they're kind of, like you were saying, the Ian Fleming, like things that really existed, these groups that came out from the Second World War, that were formed in the Second World War, and then, like you were saying, went out to kill Nazis afterwards. Like his dad and his uncle were sort of that era, and that he has he was talking a little bit about being inspired by John le Carre and the Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, where it's like spy work, the good true
spy stories, the ones that are a little bit more grounded, although Velvet's a little farther out there, but just in just a few places. I mean, you could easily adapt it so it doesn't have it. The only scene that really jumps out at me is the stealth suit. She has a glider suit in like the 50s or something. She breaks through a plate glass window and glides to another building. It's really, I think, going back, the only scene where there's this like high-tech Bond gadget thing, which is, I'm sure, what that scene was inspired by. Bond always had some crazy gadget that was ahead of its time. But you could easily just remove that one little bit, and then everything else is a period drama and it doesn't need that help at all. So, Ian Fleming was worked for the precursor for MI6. He was a British intelligence officer in World War II. There it is. Although that was pretty cool. I don't know if I want to see that taken out or not, but
It was pretty cool. I think the interesting thing was that it only worked so far. She lands and she's in tremendous amount of pain and she
yeah,
can barely walk down the stairs afterwards. And
yeah,
she understands that the suit's the only thing that stopped her from breaking her ribs. And
you're right.
that's kind of one of those, like,
She said it felt like it only felt like she was hit by a car instead of being hit by a truck.
exactly.
They made point of saying it's this cool technology. She's never used it before, so she jumps out and realizes she doesn't know how to steer. They don't make her like this, like the Roger Moore level Bond, where she just no matter what it is, hey, how you doing? I can do that. It's just perfect at everything. She gets her
Yeah.
ass kicked a couple times, and that's another thing. The fights have weight and behind them and stuff. When she gets in a fight, she gets up and she's got a bloodied lip and a black eye, and you go, yeah, she's been in a fight. There's none of this. The violence is not pretty, not in the way that it can be sometimes. Yeah,
Exactly.
the impact resistance works. So that's another thing I kind of appreciate about these type of films when they don't make it look too choreographed, too pretty. This is violence that feels very realistic level of violence to me. This is the kind of what it probably would be like to be in a fight or a firefight or whatever
Yeah.
thing has happening. So
Yeah. Even when the first guy got shot, when Jefferson got shot at the beginning,
right,
it was pretty gross.
Yeah.
It wasn't, like the squibs and then
Yeah.
falling to the ground. He just
No.
like blow, kind of hit him
there,
close
there is,
quarters and he died.
yeah, there is one
Ugh,
scene in there
yeah.
again where Velvet gets into hand to hand when she fights the three assassins that are trying to kill Roman, and she's got she takes out two of them before they know she's coming, and then the third one ends up the guy's a linebacker and has her against the wall, and it isn't like I know pressure points or anything like that she's just like, it's just do what you have to do, and she hooks her finger into his cheek and just basically rips his cheek apart from the inside. And you're thinking it's gory and everything else, but I'm like going, if you're in that situation and the size discrepancy was that's pretty much all she could do, and she did what she had to do to live, and it felt very real and necessary to the moment, not like just brutality for brutality's sake. But that's she took the other two out in a way that was much much more traditional, I would say.
Yeah.
But that's how someone her size could survive in that world, and because that should have been an unwinnable fight. If they went by the Queen's rules, she was dead. So we had to go none of this.
Yeah. See.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fisticuff.
Yeah, that's something you see in a lot of movies. It's like, I respect you as a fighter. Take your time. Let's get together. No, Velvet's taking you down. It's a bit of a gory scene. It's one that if they put that in the movie, that would make me turn my head a little bit. But again, they never went too far down that path for me. They showed violence for what it is, but didn't revel in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely appreciated that she didn't put her legs around anyone's neck to put them in a sexy leg jujitsu chokehold, which I'm so tired of seeing that.
I want to tell you something about that. I too, as a guy that's trying to exist in this space and trying to, be an ally and help in these situations without like being the man, mansplaining feminism type thing. I thought, that's funny, and I found something about the leg hold choking somebody out, and I put it up there on Heroic Girls, and I said, well, at least they didn't do the old, grabbing them with her thighs thing, that we see in so many movies, and there was this trail underneath it, and it was about like 4-1 pro grabbing guys with their heads, sitting there going, I'm a woman, I don't have a lot of upper body strength. If I'm going to kill some guy, it's going to be with my legs over and over again. And I went, okay, this is where I'm learning something, because I'm with you. I kind of felt like that was a tired trope, and it was done to sexualize the woman fighting, and I didn't, I thought that was a bit done. And there were a lot of people who said, no, if I'm a woman and I'm in a fight, I don't feel like I could ever compete with a guy's upper body strength, but I might have a shot with my legs, and I would definitely lean that. I went, okay, all right. So I just see it, and perhaps I'm a guy and I'm a perv. I just see it in the sexual connotation, but there just seems to be a lot of legs locking around heads, whereas the guys don't seem to do that so often. So.
Yeah, and then usually they're not in a skin tight leather suit or in a mini dress when it happens. You know, so I think that's absolutely 100% true. I used to do kung fu. I used to box as well. Did Thai boxing when we mixed a little bit of jujitsu in that too.
Yeah.
And that.
Are you an international spy? No, you can't say. It's all right.
Knife throw or now I have to kill you. um, but yeah, that's super true. But any kind of kicks and everything that you get as a woman with more hips than shoulders, yeah,
Right,
that's for sure. That is true. Um, Again, most of that kind of thing comes down to the camera placement. It's not the action; it's where the camera
right,
is and where the perspective is coming from. So even
right.
when, in that gruesome shot where Velvet tears the guy's face out,
Yeah,
um, we see a lot of it over his shoulder,
yeah,
which is, you're supposed to, what that does is it causes the viewer, this is film and this also is true for, any kind of storyboarding,
yeah,
is that you're putting yourself in his shoes, looking over his shoulder, choking
right,
her. So it's
yeah,
almost like you're more choking her than you are being choked, if
right.
that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
And
His
then
point
she
of
goes,
view. You're
whack.
literally from his point of view. Pretty much.
Yep.
Uh,
And then she
there.
tears his cheek out
Yeah,
and
and
you feel it.
yeah. Oh, it's just it was visceral. This is a single. And again, I don't want anyone who might be just following along and debating whether they want to read this or not. The book is not filled with moments like this, but
No,
this
no.
was a moment because normally she's smart enough not to get in this position, but this is a situation that happened. She was not expecting it, and she wasn't expecting these guys to be there trying to kill the contact that she needed to make. She
Mm-hmm.
had to act. She had to act quickly, and she didn't have a chance to, plan to slip powder into their drinks or anything. It was just we're getting in a fight. So she sneaks in, takes two of them out, and then again, she's not going to go toe to toe with this guy that's a lot bigger than she is, and so this is what she ends up doing. And I appreciated the violence for what it is. I always used to say, when I had a friend that would complain about Pulp Fiction being too violent. I said, well, but you like the Schwarzenegger movies, and he just leaves bodies left and right. At Pulp Fiction, at least shows that murder is messy. I mean, that there's some
Yeah.
consequence to killing people. That's what I felt like here. It's just that we're showing a natural consequence to this violence that normally movies kind of gloss over. That it's bloody and violent and ugly, and
Yeah, fighting
not
dirty.
reveling in it, but showing it for what it is. That I thought that I appreciated that.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious because as someone who came to it for the first time,
Hmm.
what was your impression here? Is this a book that you want to keep going on? Are you going to finish out Velvet, or where are you at?
I'm actually pretty close to finishing it right now because I
You're
did
probably
start.
ahead of me.
Yeah, I just started like plowing ahead, and then I realized I was going to get confused trying to talk about just volume one because
Right.
I actually caught myself a couple times today thinking like, oh yeah, and then you find out that, and I'm like,
Yeah.
or do you? Um, but yeah, I definitely want to see the bigger mystery. I kind of have a couple of theories already plotted in my head.
Yeah. I
One
have
of
like a list
them.
of suspects, and it has like 3 or 4 people on it right now.
Okay, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is Lars the tech, the blonde tech that
Yeah.
has, is he on your list?
Based on what we've seen of him so far, no, because he's barely done anything in these first 2 books. We've seen him mention stuff once or twice. Certainly, you're thinking of anybody who's in her agency as a suspect, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really your pool, your suspect pool. So it's
Yeah.
an economy of characters. It's got to be one of them. I'm kind of ruling out who is he, Sergeant Roberts, who's the guy she's in most direct conflict with, because he just
Yeah.
feels like the bulldog that's been sicked on her, not the guy who's like masterminding it. My list is the dead husband who may not be dead,
Mm-hmm.
and then the one that stands to benefit so much, Lieutenant Director Simonson, who's the second in command,
Mm-hmm.
who explicitly states that he's ready to take over and edge this guy out if it turns out that his
Yeah.
secretary was the spy and he didn't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
So so we have those. There were those two, and yeah, then I had anybody who was even mentioned at the agency item jotted down because any of them could be. You may be a little ahead of me in the story. Lars has just a couple times said, "Oh, I have that slide for you, sir." He hasn't done much. I do have him down as a character, as a possibility, but we've seen nothing from him that indicates he has any opinion on anything. So that's where we're at in the story for me. I bought the original issues that came out.
Mhm.
Anything with Brubaker or Rucka's name on it, I'll just buy. I bought like 3 or 4 of these, and I went, you know what? I'm going to stop buying them because I want to buy the trade paperbacks when they come out, and I just want to read the story. I'll hold off and just get the whole thing at once. And then I bought the first one. I got distracted. I forgot when the second one came out, and then I bought the big omnibus behind it, and I haven't cracked into it yet to get that far in the story. So that's where I'm at. So what is there something that's happened so far that puts Lars on your radar, or is it something? Or have you read something? Nah, okay,
Nope.
yeah, you're not
It
gonna
was
tell me.
totally, that was totally the camera was the camera. I'm sorry, the drawing.
Well, that's how cinematic this thing is drawn. Is that
Precisely.
it feels like that.
He had too many close-ups, and
Yeah.
just in volume one, and they said his name so many times. They're like, Lars,
Yeah.
Lars. You know, like you're saying, do you have that slide, Lars? Yes, I'm Lars, and I have that
Yeah.
slide. And I was like, huh. I wonder if he's going to be some like kind of a syndrome, you know, from Incredibles, where
Yeah.
he's sort of this dork that no one took seriously, you know, and he.
We
but
haven't
he's
established
got-
a motivation for him to be it yet, although it certainly it could happen. What was I gonna say? You know what that reminds me of is like when you have like Helen Hunt as a guest on Law and Order, and she's playing the guy who died next door neighbor, and you're going, well, they didn't bring her on just to be the next door neighbor. She did it. You know,
Yeah.
that's the same thing. Law and Order, whenever they have somebody famous on, and then you get introduced to them, and then it turns out they're not significant to the plot at all. I went, well, that's the murderer, because there's no reason to have them on if they're just to have like a cameo as the flower girl. You know, that's who did it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So I'm trying to think of any other smart things I have to say about Velvet. I think we've used up most of our time. You want to talk about what we're doing next month? Or is there any final thoughts on Velvet? I guess we should close out Velvet here. I love this book. It is a genre that I love. It's this kind of crime noir spy thriller thing that Brubacher just excels at. He also does a series called Criminal, which is all about like scumbag, low-life criminals in the 70s, or at least it all feels like it's in the 70s because it's drawn kind of like this, and told from their point of view, these like noir stories about them getting mixed up in things they shouldn't and going down bad paths and paying for it. It's brilliant work. He's one of the best crime writers in any genre today. I hope Velvet gets picked up and gets turned into a series because he deserves a big payday after getting kind of screwed on The Winter Soldier. That's my take. Go read Velvet, buy it, petition for it to be made into a movie. And your thoughts?
My thoughts, super fun, moves really, really fast. I took a peek at a couple of reviews online after I read it the first time, and I feel like people get really caught up in that money penny aspect where it's like, oh, she's a secretary and she shouldn't be doing these things, but she is anyway. Don't listen to those. She is a main character. She is doing her own thing, and she's framed as the main character too.
I wonder how superficial a read do you have to do to get hung up on the money penny aspect without realizing this was just this kind of mask she's wearing, and they fully explain how she ends up being the money penny sort when she's actually this giant badass spy. It's explicitly stated in the text. There's no reason for you to be going, how can she do this? They explain how she can do this.
I know. I think some people struggled. I think, but you know, if you're looking for like an awesome feminist read, I think that don't let that put you off. Like she's not a secretary first and a spy second. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know what else. I guess if you enjoyed this, it made me think a little bit of the Venture Brothers.
Well, I mean, similar source material, maybe a little bit. That's
I was just going to say, like, similar design aesthetic and similar level of world building, and where you can take something that was like kind of had a golden age, and now you're sort of looking at the rundown end of it, where things are getting messy after all the good times have passed. What becomes of all the heroes, later on? So. And
again, going back to the kind of the more feminist aspects of it, although it is a very male. I don't want to say male dominated. It's just she's in a man's world the entire time. There's just not a lot of women. We've covered that. That's true to what it would be like. And Velvet is such an extraordinary character. She's so well crafted, so well explained. So and again, a protagonist that we don't see very often. The kind that we're always complaining they don't have in Hollywood. Roles for older women who are still vibrant and deserve something. And once they can no longer play Harrison Ford's wife, even though he's 30 years older, they're like, oh, we don't do it anymore. These are the roles that should be being created in Hollywood for that. And it's really funny by setting it back in period. It's at a time when this was even more of a problem. That she would be dismissed even more. We've got a template, a blueprint to make a brilliant action movie based around a woman who Hollywood would normally not base an action franchise around. Somebody needs to pick that ball up and run with it. So, whether she's British or American, we don't know. But I think you could go either way. So let's briefly, we're at the end of our time. Just huge thumbs up for me. This is right. I've had to resist the urge to bring up Greg Rucka and Ed Brubacher books like every other month because I love those guys and I have so much of their stuff, and I try to get more female creators in. But next month, talking about Superman Smashes the Klan by Gene Luen Yang, who has won several awards. He wrote American Born Chinese, which is a brilliant book about assimilation into American culture, coming from a Chinese perspective. Superman Smashes the Klan was a book was originally a radio play. It was when Superman, the radio show, was the biggest radio show in the country. It was the golden age of wireless, right before television got big. Superman had a weekly radio show, and you would listen. You know, that's where they got the faster than a moving train, or more powerful than a speeding locomotive. You know, all that stuff. Faster than a speeding bullet. I'm sorry. And Superman couldn't. Yeah, Superman couldn't fly yet because he was more able to leap buildings in a single bound. They invented kryptonite on that show. A lot of the side characters were invented in that show. A lot of the Superman mythos actually came from this radio program that was so popular. Kryptonite got invented because the lead actor got sick and they couldn't have him for a couple episodes, so they had to explain why Superman was out of action. So they invented kryptonite. That was a plot device. So they at a time when the Ku Klux Klan was actually popular and very influential in American politics, particularly in the South, this Superman radio show took on the Klan. They came out with a story arc called Superman Smashes the Klan that explicitly made the Ku Klux Klan the enemy. You contrast that with movies where they had done the big Klan movie, Birth of a Nation. Thank you, Birth of a Nation. This was an explicit repudiation of the Klan, pointing out how explicitly racist and how un-American that was. Superman was an incredibly influential character, particularly among children, and it turned the tide in making the Klan a pariah organization, which they had not been up until that point. Mm-hmm. And so this was kind of, folklore. This is something that happened back in the late 40s, early 50s, this Superman story. Gene Luen Yang dug it up because the story was about Superman protecting a Japanese family that had just moved into town, and with a little boy and a little girl from the Klan who had been attacking and targeting them. The book is great, and we get some of the stuff that Gene Luen Yang is best at, which is discussing issues of assimilation. He's really good about it. The girl and the boy both have different ways they try to fit in. It's the whole thing of how much of my own, kind of historical culture do I hold on, and how much do I just throw it all away because I want to fit in with the people around me. And so we get a little bit of that, and then we even get into exploring Superman, who is also an alien. So, is it a Chinese family? My wife is correcting me that it's a Chinese family. Producer Patty, let me see here. Oh, yeah, you're right. You're right. I read this, and George Takei's, they called us enemy at the same time, and I probably, those were both books in our The Hero Academy, our program for kids that we ran.
I was going to say, also, you're probably confused because it's the Lee family. My name is Vivian Lee, and I'm Japanese. Yeah, it's all a humongous trap.
But does the Lee come from Japan in your last name? No, that's another thing. You psych us out like 3 or 4 different ways because your dad's name's Lee, and I know he's not Japanese, so that has occurred to me. So that's the. I was thinking wrong. I probably just got my wires crossed there. It's from Chinatown.
I'm super excited to read this. This is I love ABC American Born Chinese. It's such a great comic, and
it's kind of. I'm sure you get more and different things out of it than I do. But, for me, it's I'm never going to be a woman. I'm never going to be Chinese. But I can read, this is what the power of stories is. You can read, put yourself in someone else's shoes and try to learn a bit about their perspective and everything by reading stories like this. I highly recommend Superman Smashes the Klan. It is appropriate for kids. Probably should be assigned reading for kids. I think especially with what's going on in the world today. We might need to redo this story again and get it out there, sadly. So we're going to read Superman Smashes the Klan. If you got kids that are interested in following along sometime, this is a great book for them to read. We're going to talk about it next month. I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and we will see you in 30 days. I don't know the date. It'll be the third Sunday in
May 16th.
In May 16th? And okay, so we'll get that May 16th. Oh, yeah, it's on the screen in front of me. Yeah, right there. May 16th, right there. May 16th, we're going to be talking about Superman Smashes the Klan. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you guys in about a month. Bye.
Bye.